special edition here on Green with Envy. The three-man weave is in the house, and we've got a very, very special guest. We are joined by the Hall of Famer, the voice of the Boston Celtics. Mike Gorman's here. Let's go. What up, what up, what up? Welcome into a very special edition of Green with Envy. We've got the three-man weave in the building. Of course, I'm your boy, Will Weir. We've got my best friend and co-host and the coach of the podcast, Greg Manakis. And you know we always got the leader of the Taylor gang, Adam Taylor, here with us. But we got to get right down to business. We have a living legend joining us today. As I said, he is the voice of the Boston Celtics, a Hall of Famer, both actually for the Basketball Hall of Fame and the Boston Latin School Hall of Fame. Have to throw that in there with our Boston Latin School love. We have Mike Gorman joining us here today. Thanks for being here, Mike.
That one.
Well, I want to talk a little bit about maybe your Boston Latin Dorchester connections here in a minute, but Mike, you know, there's so many different things that we want to talk to you about that we were trying to think of what's the best way to really open it up. So if you'll oblige us, myself, Greg, and Adam, we want to just kind of put out a couple of names that were really important to us in our viewing of watching the Celtics. And we want you to just take it wherever you want to go with it, whether it's a story. We got a few clips here that we might load up and watch those for a second and maybe just let us know what you're thinking and feeling. But Adam, let's start with you. Who's the first name that you want to give to Mike here?
Well, if we're talking about legends, we need to go with the big ticket, Mr. Kevin Garnett. So just any story or first impressions from KG.
KG was he controlled everything. He controlled where you sat. He controlled when you ate, when you didn't eat on the plane. He was just a total control freak. And because the team was doing so well, everybody went along with it. And but he was something in that way. I'm trying to think of some specific stories that I can tell you that he wouldn't come and hunt me down for. I'm not sure I want to do that. But again, he was a guy who I remember the first time I saw him play. He was in a Celtic uniform. Of course, he would go and play for Minnesota, but it seemed that every time we would play Minnesota, there was somebody, he was injured or I didn't go to the game or something. I went about 4 or 5 years there where I never saw him play. So when he played out in that crazy armory in Italy at what was 3 o'clock in the morning, our time back here, I saw the real Kevin Garnett, and he just, he took over the game. He berated the officials. He berated the guys in the other team. He encouraged his guys. He got every rebound. He made all his shots. He just was totally dominant. And I walked away from there thinking, like, this is a special year coming, no question about it. Because I mean, I saw Larry in his prime. And saw Paul, who's we may get this later on or not, but Paul Pierce is my favorite player of all time. But KG, when he got it going with that bunch, it's funny. Whenever you saw KG mouthing some guy off, right over his shoulder was Perkins. Perkins' head was always like right here, like it sat on his shoulder. He was, yeah. So as tough as KG was, and it was legit, everybody knew that if you did happen to get lucky and get through KG, that Perkins was waiting for you on the other side. But that's the way it was. Perkins was barely out of high school then. Ray Allen had come in and wanted to make his mark. Paul wanted to make his mark. And none of them were pursuing the same thing. They had a mutual goal. They wanted to win a championship, but none of them individually was looking to win a rebounding title, say, looking to win a scoring title, or be the best shooter on this team. So KG, I always thought it was like the Godfather. He was Al Pacino, and I don't know who would be. Paul Pierce would probably be. What was his name? James Caan
character.
Yes, James Caan's character. Yeah. But yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question. I'll probably didn't tell you any good stories. But if I told you the stories, I tell you KG would be on the phone to me tonight, and that would be it for me. So
That does seem like the common thread. Whenever you ask anybody anything about KG, they're like, "Well, I don't know what I can tell you." But one question I have for you, Mike, about KG, is just as a follow up, is there anybody else throughout your years covering the Celtics that you said kind of matched KG's presence, just like being in the room with him? Because that's one thing. I've never been in the room with Kevin Garnett. A quick humble brag, Will and I did get to have a drink with David Ortiz one time, which was pretty special. Never had a chance to hang out with Kevin Garnett. So what's it like being in a room with Kevin Garnett? And is there anybody else that compares to his energy?
He dominates the room as soon as he comes in. Bird also dominated the room, but Bird didn't want to dominate the room. He didn't really want people talking to him. KG would open up and bring people in around him. And so, soon he's in the group telling great stories. Larry was very quiet. So I would tell you that nobody really matched the intensity level. I don't see anybody on this team really that matches it. Marcus Smart did maintain as far as I was concerned, but the front office differed with me on that one. Because Marcus was a special player, but we won't get into him because he's not playing for us anymore. So anyway, yeah, it was. There's nobody really who matched KG's intensity in a room. He took the room over. The conversation stopped when he walked into a room. He was so big and so physically imposing. He didn't like to be called the 7-footer. He wanted to insist he was 6'11", but he was 7 feet or 7'1" easily, and he had long arms. And so when he came into a room, everybody was looking up at him. I mean, I find myself looking up at Scalabrine, and Scalabrine is compared to what KG was.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like with you mentioned KG and Larry, and then you even kind of transitioned a little bit to the current team. And this is something I've been curious about. And I know you had some comments about the leadership that was on this team the last couple of years or so, and what it really looks like. How would you look at, KG's leadership versus Larry's leadership, just because those are the two kind of real staple leaders that we look at over, the last championship Celtics teams, and then maybe how, either what this team is growing into or what they're lacking for leadership in the current team?
Yeah, I don't want to get into the lacking part because I think Joe's doing a job of trying to bring this team along as a group, and he doesn't want to single one person out. Al Horford probably would be a natural choice to be your guy if you're going to make somebody a captaincy. And I'm sure he'd do a really good job because he's very intense, and he also is very much wants to instruct and teach. And you need a captain who's doing that. You can't, and he's 30 something. You can't have a captain who's 27 years old. That's ridiculous. So that was the part of the problem I think the Celtics had in the past few years was their best players were very, very young. And so you couldn't really turn around and say, all right, we're going to make, Brown and Tatum co-captains 3 years ago when they were like 23 and 22 years old or something like that. So, the thing is that people, I'm jumping all over the place and I regret that, but I'm sorry for that. But the thing that people don't realize, but if you look, you'll find out this is a fact. You don't win championships when you're in your 20s. You win championships when you're in your early 30s, from 31 to about 33 or 34. Those are the prime years for guys. And this bunch, as good as they are, have a long way to go to get to that point. Now, if they can get themselves a title between now and then, that would be wonderful. But I think right now, where they're at, they'd have to steal one here. I think this little tournament we just watched showed us what things are changing in this league very quickly. That Pacer team is for real. That kid is the point guard. He's for real. Now, if we have Porzingis, do we win that game? Probably, but we didn't, and that's the way it is in the pros. You don't always have all the guys you want, he was a maestro, and we suddenly went. I'd have to go back and do some study on this. Grandy he does this kind of stuff all the time, but it's all of a sudden things have gone from games where teams are winning 95 to 93 or 94 to 92, and all of a sudden now it's 127 to 125. They scored 144 points in that Milwaukee game, 140 plus points in that Milwaukee game 2 nights ago. That's crazy. And so if that's the way the game is going, we might not be as set up. I mean, Brad Stevens set us up perfectly to be an excellent 3-point shooting team, which is what we are, because he truly believes that's where the game is going. And I truly hope he's right, because that's what we do well. But if the ball stops going in, we have issues. And Porzingis hopefully will save the day in the middle. But I hope he does. He's supposed to play on Friday night, which would be great to see if he can come back this quickly. And I've had to talk to him a couple of times. He's a delightful kid. He speaks 3 or 4 different languages. He's really bright. He understood it the first time around with the Knicks was a mistake on his part, in the sense that he acted poorly. He acted like a 19-year-old kid. Suddenly he came from where he was in Latvia or whatever, and all of a sudden he's on Broadway. That's just a long walk. And he didn't handle it all that well first time around. Now he seems to be, his best friend on the team is Brown, and they're almost inseparable off the court. So Brown would be a good influence there. So anyway, if he stays healthy, this team has a real good shot to win it because the pieces are there. But the one piece we can't afford to lose is the one guy who's been hurt so far, and that's Porzingis. Because even though people say, what's Mike talking about? What I'm talking about is we'd still finish in the top 2 or 3, but I don't think we win a championship without Porzingis. He's the missing piece to get you from second or third to first.
Right. That's a big statement, right? With Jalen, you mentioned their budding friendship on both on and off the court. But one of the takes that I had, I love Porzingis even when he was playing for Washington and nobody really watching his games. Obviously, him and Luka didn't really mesh in Dallas, but the 2-man game that they're developing right now between Brown and Porzingis is really interesting because the Brown and Tatum pairing, and I'm sure you can speak to this better than I can, being courtside for all those games, right? They don't necessarily like make each other better. They're both on the court and they do their own thing.
You said that now, not me. Okay.
And with Porzingis, you can just see like they have a chemistry. There's like a natural 2-man game, both with Brown and Tatum, just like Tatum and Brown aren't going to be the greatest screeners into short space, into short rolls or anything like that. They don't really play off of each other. And with Porzingis being on the court, one of the things that I said before the season, Mike, was that I thought he was going to be looked at as the second best player on the Celtics at the end of the season, not necessarily even just the most important player, but the second best player. So what are you seeing out of Porzingis being courtside that makes him special?
Again, he likes it. He's very happy to be here. And that's, you say, well, all players are. All players are not that way. Players get very disgruntled early on relationships. He loves it here. He loves the people here. He loves the crowd. He's made a good friend in Brown. He knows that this team, he's got a real good chance to win a championship, which he really didn't have in Dallas. I mean, they were good, but they weren't going to win a championship. And certainly Washington's a mess. So, in a lot of different ways. He's the guy. I keep coming back to it. He's the guy who has to be the shot blocker, the guy who wouldn't allow Halliburton to get into the lane the way he did the other night and do the damage that he did. That's what we all thought we had last year in Williams, and now he's hurt, which is too bad. Again, I'm probably not answering your question. I'm not used to being on this side.
Well, hey, feel free to ask. I don't know what you think about like the podcast industry or whatever, but if you want to ask us some questions, like I was talking,
we're always open.
Before you got on, I was like, man, I've been watching. I remember being a kid, like at my nana's house and in Dorchester, and just tuning into the games and feeling like I'm hanging out with you and Tommy. And it's just amazing to have you here. So if you want to ask us some questions, by all means, like Adam,
we can flip the script on the whole thing here.
We need to hear more from Adam. But yeah, feel free to flip the script. Adam, stay off mute, man. Come hang with us.
I like to just make sure there's no background noise, just in case the dog.
Good. I got all the individual audio tracks. We're good, man. You can have your dog snoring in the background.
He's asleep, man. That's the whole point, right?
Over here.
I'll tell you, here's a volunteer story here. Having bumped into Tom Heinsohn and changed my life. I'm working at a radio station in New Bedford, Massachusetts. I'm 28 years old. I spent 4 years and 5 years in the military after I get out of college. And I'm going nowhere. I'm doing some high school basketball games. And the only way I could do them, I had to go sell them. And so that's the general manager said to me, he said, you can put anything you want on the air as long as you sell it. And he go out and bring back spots. And I remember I put a boxing match on once, and we had a notebook with 3-hole notebook, and all that was a copy you were supposed to read for the spots. And so I get the book and I look at it, and he's got 30 seconds for me to read between each round. Well, it was only 60 seconds between each round. So I remember looking at Paul, and I said, Paul, you've got 3 minutes, a minute and a half worth of copy here for a minute space. And he looks at me and he goes, read fast. That became, I'm like, oh, this is how this works, And a month later, this is a true story, the New Bedford Standard Times decided not to send a writer. What they're going to do is, instead, they're going to listen to me on the radio, and then the writer would write about it for the Sunday newspaper. And this is after the second or third fight I had done, and these guys are terrible fighters. So I ended up making it, So I left the body right to the head, hits them down, and these guys were just far away from each other. And then the next day, the New Bedford Standard Times, the headline was "Fight of the Year," and Fight of the Year never really took place at all, except in my mind. But that I'm sitting in a meeting in Providence, and we get a contract to do 3 Providence College games a year for the next 3 years. And so they say to me, you can do it. You can do play-by-play. But you're a color guy, we got to find one. And I said, let's try to get Tom Heinsohn. And the general manager says, Tom Heinsohn doesn't want to drive down to Rhode Island to do Providence College. I said, well, how do we know? And he said, well, if you get Tom Heinsohn, you go ahead and do the games. And I said, okay. So now here's where the life has changed in the time we've all been in this business. I get to my phone, I pick up the phone, I look up Boston Garden, I call Boston Garden, a lady answers the phone, she says, Boston Garden, can I help you? I said, yeah, Tom Heinsohn, please. She says, one moment. Okay. I'm like, get out of here.
I wish I knew it was that easy. We could have just called up NBC Sports Boston and said, hey, can you put Mike on the line here for us?
Exactly. I'll tell you another story like that, which is true. But so Tommy comes on, and I meet him for dinner. He sells me an insurance policy, and he agrees to do the games. We did.
What kind of insurance policy?
Universal life. I let it lapse after a few years. Yeah. Tom was always trying to sell something. He had some angle going somehow. But he became my best friend, and it was so easy to do the games with him because, again, you've heard these stories millions of times if you've listened to me. The first night I played the Indiana Pacers, Chuck Person and that crowd were playing for the Pacers then. And I go up to the overhang, and 2 things happen. One, I see a guy sitting up there I'd never seen before in my life. And I said, this is where we're going to do the broadcast from. And he says, yeah, I know. My name is Dick Light. He said, I did the stats for Roger Twibel. I'd like to do stats for you. And I said, well, sure, let's give it a try, see what happens. That was 43 years ago. He'll be there tomorrow night.
Still going strong, yeah.
The best. I mean, I did the Olympic basketball for a while for NBC. I've done all sorts of stuff for CBS college basketball, did all the Big East games. No one could touch Dick Light with the 10-foot pole in terms of giving you stats, giving you information. Because he doesn't just, a lot of stat guys just hand you a piece of paper that says Gorman 7 for 14. Dick hands you a thing that's 2 paragraphs long. I don't know why he's 2 for 14, And so I meet Dick up there, and I say, okay. So I'm standing, I get all my notes spread out in front of me, all color-coded and all that bullshit you did in those days to make sure you knew who was there. And Tommy comes walking in. He looks at me, he says, you mind if I use some colorful language here? Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Go for absolutely. Let it fly.
So Tommy just looks at me and goes, what's that shit? And I said, those are my notes. And he goes, and he reaches over, he crumbles up a little ball, and he goes like that and throws him off the balcony. He says, we're not going to need notes like that. We're going to talk about what happens right in front of us.
That's amazing.
So I did the games for the next 35, 40 years until he passed away. Never read game notes. I'd walk in, I'd sit down. We used to go in, we had a routine. I would meet him in the press room. We'd go down to Red Auerbach's office. We'd knock on the door. Red would be in there all the time. And Red never spoke directly to me. I never said a word. And this is for a year. We do this now because we're doing every game. And Tommy would sit with Red. Red would say, well, I think this team is this, X, Y, Z. Tommy would say, okay. And we'd get up and leave, and that would be it. So now, and then we'd go sit with Johnny Most because Tommy and Johnny were both chain smokers. So they had to go to the same place to smoke. So we would meet Johnny Most there. And John became my kind of big brother number 2, and he would really help me a lot in trying to develop a style and trying to develop some expressions, different things that might separate me from the rest. But so that became my bunch, and that was that's how I lived my life. Except for I used to do the Big East, which is really good basketball, great, especially when I was doing it. Remember, the Celtics always played on Wednesday and Friday and Sunday afternoons. So the Celtics would play on Wednesday night. I'd do that game. I'd do the Big East game on Thursday. I'd go back to the Celtics on Friday. I'd leave the Garden at about 11 o'clock after the game. I'd drive to the Logan Airport. I would wait till morning. I'd get the first flight out in the morning to Philadelphia. I'd go and I'd do Villanova at noontime in a regional game. I'd jump back in a car. I'd drive up to New York City. I'd do St. John's that night in Madison Square Garden. Then I'd jump back to go to the airport, get in time for the Bruins for the Celtics game on Sunday, and start that whole cycle all over again. So I'd do 8 games a week for about a 6-week stretch, and I'd never be home. And people would say to me, "How can you do that?" I would say, how can you get tired with 28,000 people going crazy in the Carrier Dome? How can you get tired at St. John's, Madison Square Garden? It's electric. And forget about the Big East tournament. To this day, I'm standing in the ramp trying to do a report, and I got flattened. I just felt like I got hit from behind and went down. And it's Patrick Ewing. He looked at me. He says, "Stay the bump out of my way." Okay. And just kept running. I'm thinking, like, wow, this is crazy. But yeah, so I was in the right place at the right time, and I got to do a lot of games that were just when I got to the Hall of Fame thing, and people, a lot of them didn't realize I had ever done any college basketball. And then the other guys, I'm on the putting green at the country club about a month ago, and I'm hitting there's one other guy out there, and he comes over to me and says, "You Mike Gorman?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I want to build something early." And he talks, he said, "I loved you in the Big East, blah, 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 blah." Go back and forth about 10 minutes. And finally he goes, "So anyway, what are you doing with yourself now?"
He didn't know that you were the Celtics broadcaster.
You always wonder what happened to that scrappy Mike Gorman guy who used to call those Big East basketball games back in the 80s. Really hope he made something of himself.
Hey, Mike, speaking of that, we got your heir apparent, Drew Carter, that's been calling the road games. Will and I had the chance to interview him before the season. Seems like a really good kid.
Mm-hmm.
You've talked about all the people that have. You say it again?
He's a puppy.
He is a puppy. He's like 25, 26 years old.
Yeah.
You mentioned you kind of were getting your start in your late 20s and whatnot, and a lot of people have kind of helped you along the way. So what is the relationship been like with Drew thus far? And like for the Celtics fans, because I don't know if you know this, he's right now, Celtics fans are kind of like, I don't know. We don't know if we like Drew Carter because he's not Mike. So what do you got to say to Celtics fans that are listening to Drew Carter and probably going to be listening to Drew Carter for the next 20 years?
What's the scouting report on Drew Carter?
Yeah.
And did you need to throw away his color-coded notes?
I think Drew's going to be just fine. And I hope people give him a chance and don't get caught up in it. He's not Mike Gorman, because he knows what he's talking about. He graduated, I think, either first or second in his class out of Syracuse, which has a terrific broadcasting school. It's put up a lot of good guys, as you know. And he got some award. I think his name was Jim Nance, but I think it's some sort of award he got as the number one guy. So, and this was a class that had Iron Eagle's son in it. It has a lot of guys in it who had kids now coming of age. He's going to do just fine. We haven't had a chance with him doing the away games and me doing just the home games. We're not in the same place at the same time too much. So we're going to have to try to we've been talking about getting out to dinner. And that may happen the next couple of days now when we have some time off. But yeah, he knows what he's talking about. He's good. He's young, and by that he'll make mistakes that young guys make. And he asks me all the time. Every time he does a game, he'll fire me off a note and say, "What did you think?" So he's open to constructive criticism, which I think is good. And I told him, I said, "Look, anything I say to you, you can use, and fine. If you don't want to use it, that's fine. I got no problem." And again, the times I've heard him, he's trying to fit in with Scal. And Scal's a very confident young guy.
Well, you know that better than anybody, right? Trying to fit in with Cal.
Yeah. But well, see, Tommy is also one way to play the game. You run, just get the ball and run. Run. Tommy used to say we would run. Think about this. He would say we would run off made free throws. Now that's a hard thing to do, right? Everybody's lined up, they'd still run a fast break off a made free throw. So Scal has 97 different ways you can play the game. And he'll tell you about every one of them if you let him. So, and I don't mean in a negative way. He wants to instruct. He coaches his son. He coaches his daughter. He wants to do that. I didn't want to coach, and I'm surprised. He did a thing for Golden State down the G League for a while. And I guess it didn't work out all that well because he didn't speak very favorably about it. And what he's doing now is much easier than coaching. Did you see the look on the Knicks' faces last night? I'm jumping around again, but on the Knicks' faces last night when they realized they were losing and they weren't going to be able to win, and that $500,000 a piece just went flying out that window over there. That was, they were not worried about they weren't going to get a trophy. No. That Adam Silver, that's a brilliant move by him. He just made the whole thing just dollar oriented. You can say what you want.
What was your favorite part of the in-season tournament? Because it is so new. This is the inaugural year, and actually the night that I met you after the game at the bar happened to be the first it was the first game for the Celtics right after that Nets game. So what was it about it that you think really clicked? Because it was an unknown, but there's no doubt that this was a success right now for where it's at.
The fact that they got quickly to the one and you're done, everybody likes that. Everybody wants to see people go out and play, and if they lose, you go home.
Very March Madness, right? Very NCAA tournament style.
Yeah. And so that's what they were able to do with that quick little play-in. But once they were in the play-in, if I don't think at this particular stage that the Indiana Pacers could beat the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series, but put one game up, they got a shot.
This is exactly what I said in our post-game show, that it was that one game. So and you felt that energy, like that Neesmith dunk, and then they basically, I said to Greg, I thought they were going to storm the court.
That's what you wanted to send, didn't he?
Yeah. Oh,
he enjoyed everything.
It was definitely personal.
He hitting threes and dunking on people. Yes. So anyway, I do think the one you've done is a big appealing. I think the fact that I would not necessarily ever want to watch New Orleans play the Lakers, but I will tonight to see Zion play against LeBron tomorrow night or whenever the game is.
That'll be fun.
So it's made for some matchups that you wouldn't ordinarily get during the regular season, and it's in Vegas, and there's a tremendous amount of money at stake. Tremendous. I mean, there are and I name these guys only because they're the highest paid guys on the Celtics, but to Jalen say, it's not that much money to him, $500,000. It's just not, to who's down the end of the bench. Give me a good bench guy.
Sam Hauser, Delano Banton, Neemias Queta.
How about those guys? Huh? They were lucky. So there are guys like that on every team now that are just waiting. And assistant coaches are part of this. The trainers are part of this. And these are guys who make, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year. Now they may make $500,000 in one night. Like I said, there was a shot of Brunson on the bench as time was running down. Yeah. He knew he had spent half of it in his head already. It was gone now. That was gone.
It is cool that they're giving even the losing teams are getting something. I think the Celtics players each got like $50,000, and then if you make it to Vegas, you get like maybe $100,000. So it's not like you get nothing.
Like 500, 300.
Cornette's not paying off the entire mortgage, with the $50,000 check, but he's getting there.
He can buy a few groceries, maybe. He'll be able to get something with that. But
he had the best 5 minutes of his professional life the other night on the court.
He looked great. You know what, Will? I felt bad. I listened back to our podcast, our post-game podcast. We didn't even mention Luke. Luke played great in that game.
This is what happens when you don't let me on the show at night time because I'm asleep. Because I know
Adam's in the UK, so it's tough. It's tough to get Adam on some of these later night podcasts. But one thing I want to pivot us to a little bit here is I'm going to go all the way back to something you said at the beginning of the show, Mike. You said Paul Pierce is your favorite Celtic, and I feel like we do need to talk about that a little bit here. And one of the things that I want to pull up here is, this is, I think, one of our collective favorite clip. So we're just going to play the clip here, and then we can jump back into it.
Harrington talking to Pierce. And Joe DeRosa telling him to shut up. Pierce buries it right to Harrington's face.
I don't know what
So,
it was. I have no idea.
Walk us through it. What do you think you were thinking in that moment, and then why is Paul such a favorite of yours?
I liked it all. If I were going to edit that call, I liked the call actually. I thought my timing was pretty good. I just cut off the last part about in Harrington's face. I don't know what that's embarrassing that I said that. Paul, what makes me like Paul, a couple of things. One is the first 10 or 15 years I did the Celtics, I did Big East basketball when the Celtics were on the road, and Tommy and Red did the games on the road. So I never got that close to Larry or Kevin or any of those guys because I was never in the same place with them. Yeah. Whereas once you travel with the team, all of a sudden you're with them on elevators. You're with them trying to get from the bus inside the arena, and it's pouring out, and these guys are helping each other. And that's where you meet people, and that's where you become friends. I remember one night getting back from landing at Hanscom Air Force Base, and there's about 6-8 inches of snow on the ground, and it's still snowing harder. And so I get to my car, I'm starting to scrape my car, and I realize over the other side, I can see through the window, somebody scraped my car on the other side. And I look up, and it's Tayshaun Prince. Okay. And he's just doing it to help. Are you? And we became friends afterwards just off of that. And when I see him now, I'll go like this or something like that, and he'll scrape back at me. But when you travel with guys, you become their friends. So that made me close to Paul than I would be with Larry, than I would be with Kevin. And Tommy said this before me, and I felt it, and I pissed out that he kind of said it before me on the air. He did. But he was asked a question: if he have one guy have the ball in his hands with 10 seconds left in the game, and the game on the line, who does he want in his hands? He said, without hesitation, he said, Paul Pierce. Now, here's the guy who played with Kuz, Russell, Havlicek. Yeah. I mean, we've all seen
a lot.
He's seen the whole 9 yards. And he says, Paul Pierce, without hesitation. And another thing I like about Paul is if you start to play that quote in front of Paul can say every line in it. His timing is perfect. You know exactly where it comes. I was at a function not too long ago, and that's how he introduced me. Was with that clip.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah,
but Mike, I'm curious because
Paul's just lucky moment since he left, but he's I saw him the other night. He looks good, and yeah, he's my guy.
And I'm curious because you said you get to why Paul's part of your favorite. You get to see him every day at that time that he's playing, and we actually asked Dana Barros the same question that I'm about to ask you here in a minute. But with Paul Pierce, and you think of Antoine Walker early in Paul Pierce's career, and they were to your point. We were just talking about Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum. You couldn't really name them co-captains at 22, 23. Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker kind of had a similar moment in those early 2000s where, we got out of a dark age of Celtics basketball, and it was led by two really young guys in Paul Pierce and Antoine Walker. And so I'm curious, are there any parallels between what you saw from young Paul and Antoine? And obviously we've got a much more extended run of what we've seen with Jaylen and Jason. But I'm just curious if there's any parallels between those two young guys and watching them develop so closely as you have.
I haven't really thought of that. True question. Antoine, I want to say this about him. I like Antoine. He's a good guy. He's had some bumps in the road since he left, and he's doing okay, I guess, from what I hear. But Antoine played for Antoine. Paul played for the Celtics. Now, Antoine's probably yelling if he did this podcast. Saying that's bullshit. I don't necessarily mean it in that sense. I mean it in the sense that he really wanted to play well. That's what drove him. He wanted to look at a box score and see him playing really well. He didn't want to see him playing poorly. There were talks about when they won the championship at Kentucky, trying to get him more involved, but he wasn't involved, and so he wasn't his championship. So I felt badly for that because I felt that kind of haunted him his whole career. I mean, he had some great nights. he could do that crazy wiggle of his up and down the court, and people liked it. And he had a chance to be really a big deal in this community if he stuck around. He chose not to, which is too bad. Paul's come back home because I think Paul sees this now as home. I'm not sure he did before. And Antoine never really saw this as home. He played here, and he loved the Garden, fans. But when the game was over, he left the state.
Yeah, that's interesting. Antoine was Will's favorite player. I was a huge
Antoine
fan. That was Will's favorite player when we were kids. So we're both born in '89. Just give you a sense, kind of where we're. Right, so we were coming out of the dark ages, Mike. So anybody that was putting the ball in the basket after the dark ages of the 90s, we were excited about that. But I was a Dana Barros guy, and we were lucky enough to have Dana on the pod a couple of times. And I know that Dana, Dana's still around the team. I don't know if he's still working for the team in the capacity, but I know he's always at the games. And you mentioned Antoine not really feeling like part of the team, but one thing that Joe Mazzulla did this offseason was bring in, he brought in Rondo, he brought in Paul into training camp and whatnot. And I was just wondering if you could kind of give your perspective on Joe and how he's developed in year 2 versus year 1. And he's been around the team for longer than that. So how you've seen him grow over the years.
He was never comfortable last year with the role of being the coach. He wanted to be the coach. He was comfortable at practice. He was comfortable in games, but he wasn't comfortable outside when he was walking down the street and someone was going to call him coach. I don't think he didn't want that happen yet. And so he became really he internalized everything. His press conferences were hard to watch because he gave 2 and 3 word answers to.
They were very hard to watch. That's my God, it's
very
an understatement.
And so they're not hard to watch anymore, though. He has a sense of humor now. He gets along with Abby. He gets along with Scal. He doesn't just give him an answer quickly. He gives him thought-out answers. He doesn't get it as soon as the last answer is there. Boom! He doesn't do that routine anymore. He'll be gone before the directors go crazy because those are the kind of shots they don't want to see a guy walking out on them. So, Jim Edmonds, our guy, sitting there in the truck with a finger like this, like right on the button. He's like, as soon as boom, he's going to hit that before Joe gets up and leave. Now Joe doesn't run. He takes the extra 10 seconds to maybe say something, maybe make a joke with Scal or whatever. So I would tell you that he's come 180 degrees in terms of personality. And I think now he's comfortable with who he is and where he's going, and he understands that he's going to win some, he's going to lose some, but he's going to be in them. They don't get blown out very much. He keeps teams in the game. I think he's the coach of the Celtics the next 20 years. I think he is. I think he's a guy like me in a way. He's in the right place at the right time, and he got an opportunity. And if I don't sit in that room in Providence at WPRO TV, and I don't say, let's go get Tom Heinsohn, and they bring me some ex-URI player or some ex-Providence College player, I'll die. I probably die on the vine right there and don't never get the chance. Because I remember when the Prism job opened, there were tons of guys up here, Bob Lobel. I go through a whole list of names of guys who wanted that job, Mike Lynch, who wanted that job. And I'm down there in Providence, Rhode Island, and I'm sending out a resume, and I don't have any resume. How many games have you done in my life? I've done none. So if Tommy didn't come and speak up for me and just said, sure, I'll work with Bob, I'll work with Mike, I'll work with those other guys, my whole life changes.
Well, Mike, I mean, I'm going to be... Oh, go ahead, Adam. Jump in.
No, it's all good. I was just going to say, how do you think the new coaching additions, along with like Cassell, Charles Lee, bringing back Phil Pressey, how do you think that's helped kind of empower Joe to be more?
I hope it does. I hope it helps Joe, and I hope those guys aren't necessarily coaches in waiting, because that ultimately could be a problem. I mean, Sam wants to be a head coach. I know he does, and he should want to be a head coach. Lee wants to be a head coach, and so they got guys there who are looking beyond this. And now they came in to help Joe. And I think they like Joe, and I think they're legitimately trying to help Joe. But if things would suddenly go wrong, if the Celtics would come out of this and they're devastated by that loss they had in the tournament and lose 10 out of the next 12 games and start to head south, and people start pointing out maybe there are some holes here somewhere. My wife just walked through and she's giving me the hook.
Yeah, we're gonna wrap up here in just a second. Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I think if we're doing, you guys call me 5 years from now and find out what I'm doing, Joe will still be the coach.
Well, maybe we'll be like that same guy that was wondering what you were doing after you announced all the Big East games. We'll be wondering where you're at, what you're doing here in a couple of years, Mike. But honestly, man, this has been an absolute pleasure having you join us here. Mike, I mentioned to you when I first met, I'm from Dorchester. You were nice enough, you and your wife, Terry, to let me and my Dorchester friends come over and say hello to you. And of course, myself and Greg also went to Latin school. So having you here is honestly really big for us. And just thank you for taking the time to stop by and chat with us today.
And Mike, I'm gonna put you to the test one last time. Can you read that sentence on the screen?
You want me to read that? Oh, it's hard for me to read. This is Mike Gorman, and you're listening to Green with Envy. Okay, it's Will, Adam, and Greg. All right, here we go. This is Mike Gorman, and you're listening to Green with Envy with Will, Adam, and Greg.
And that's it. That's perfect, Mike. Thank you so much for joining us today, man. That was really truly awesome.
Really appreciate it.
Playoffs are over, okay?
Yeah,
hey, we got to have a full episode, and we'll really dig into the Dorchester Latin School connections on the next episode. I promise.
I'm sure
this is actually
the
second time. I don't know if you remember, Mike. This is actually the second time I've been on a podcast with you. I think we did one about 2 years ago.
I remember doing an interview with you in when the Celtics played over in London.
Was it when they were in London? It might have been. It might be the third time then.
Or I thought it was maybe Milan. No,
maybe it'll be one
on
of
the road. Maybe Celtics in Europe.
Yeah, Celtics in Europe, and then I think we did one during the COVID season as well. So we've done a few, but it's always good to speak to you. So thank you very much for jumping on, Mike.
My pleasure. We'll do this again, I hope.
Take care.
All right, thank you, Mike.
All right, we'll see you guys.
All right, man.
Take
care, Mike.
Hello.
Appreciate it. Will do.
Yeah,
Take care.
Come down and say hello if you're at a game.
Oh, will
do.